I'm glad to say we've finally got the panel in here. We've got barrister and writer Stephen Barrett, we've got columnist at Spiked Online, Ella Whelan, and William Clouston, leader of the Social Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Seen you for a while, William.
No, it's
I
been
assume
a while.
you're still leader of the Social Democratic Party.
Yeah, we're still plugging away.
Excellent. Good to see you all. Yeah. Well, there's so much to talk about tonight. I don't know, where should we begin? I suppose we should begin with the Rwanda nonsense because, Stephen, you are, as I've often said, the legal department representation here tonight. I just had Ivan Sampson on earlier on today, who I thought was talking absolute nutter balderdash when he said that, you know, it's not for the Parliament to make rules which are in some way in breach of international law. Surely it's quite obvious that that's what they should be doing.
Yes, and lawyers who speak in public and say that international law is superior to our own law are not merely wrong, they're also distinctly anti-democratic.
Yes. Because
the fundamental principle, and we had a civil war about this,
right,
but we did not want to be ruled by an autocratic dictator, a monarch, a king.
Yes.
We wanted to be ruled by a democratic parliament, and they are sovereign. And international law is the law of sovereigns. It's contracts between promises.
Yes.
Between princes. And it is never binding upon those of us who are merely in the state. There's an argument that it is binding on the government, which depends very much upon the international law in particular, but it's never binding on Parliament. Parliament can do whatever it wants and whatever it considers necessary in our defence and in our protection. And, you know, this issue of immigration is quite clearly, for however you see it, it is about national security.
Yeah. And also Parliament, William, is for the people, isn't it? I mean, it is the people, effectively. It may not feel like it very often. It may not represent us as we would like it to, but that's their job, isn't it? We elect them to do what we want them to do.
That's true, but we have a generation of politicians that are used to these powers useless. Well, they are useless as well. They're used to outsourcing all this stuff, so they don't take any responsibility. Stephen's quite right. We can choose to incorporate some international law if we want, and we can abide, but we can also choose not to do so. That's the key. So the responsibility...
That must be surely our right as a nation.
The responsibility, if you believe in sovereignty and democracy, it is basics, absolute basics. So this whole thing, and we'll get onto the detail in a bit possibly, but the whole thing, no one is going to Rwanda.
No.
This is a flawed
I think the detail
scheme.
is a pointless exercise to even look at.
It's a little bit of theatre in the West End, isn't it?
It is. I don't think, Ella, anybody in their right mind would say to you or me or either of the panel that this is actually going to work. And it's been a kind of pointless exercise. I described it yesterday as a bit like watching The Wizard of Oz and waiting for Toto to pull the curtain back, and there's this guy in a suit whose name is Rishi Sunak, and he's just sort of playing with some toys.
Well, we've had we're sort of used to these, like, supposedly nail-biting moments in Parliament, particularly, because the Conservative Party has been at the brink of, or, it seems to be at the brink of collapse several times, even going back to Theresa May's sort of era. There were all these votes and moments of potential split. Maybe it's fatigue with us that I don't think anyone was that excited by, even among the sort of political commentariat. But also within, among their own ranks, all the rebels turn out to be not very rebellious at all. The bill turns out to have a pretty smooth ride, and no one is really that fussed about it. And I think it's probably because they know that this isn't, it's not a sort of solution that's going to put a lid on the issue. Because, as much as there is, as Stephen has outlined very well, the sort of legal, the history of what a parliament can and can't do, or what it should and shouldn't be allowed to do, and the problem with lawyers and all of this. But there is this fudge that the government's going to have to get over at some point or face, which is that you have a fundamental clash of international law, international rules, courts somewhere else, the ECHR, versus what you and I and Joe Bloggs vote for and expect to be put into practice in terms of politics. And, at the moment, Richard's United's got David Cameron high up, who's obviously come in and given his opinion behind the scenes about don't even go there with the ECHR. You could feel a shift with all of that. They're not going to do anything. They're basically briefing now, suggesting they're briefing civil servants to say, just don't worry about it.
Just don't do it.
Just do what we say. Don't worry. It's not that.
And also the other
all a pretense.
The other massive failing of it is that you're asking people who commit breaches of the law on a daily basis, who run criminal gangs, running drugs, guns, people, whatever you like, brothels, you're asking them to obey a law. Well, of course they're not going to obey it, are they? Because they don't obey laws. It's like asking people who drive cars without insurance to get insurance. Sorry, it's not happening.
The really sad thing is, Mike, that this is so frustrating for the public because there's a big political constituency who want a secure border, and we're not asking for very much. I've made the point so many times. We want this sorted, and yet it's really surprising from a political point of view. So forget the, put the legals to the side. Why on earth did Sunak pin his sort of flag to something which is completely unworkable and can't work?
Right.
It's like, I need to get through this week or this month. But in the end, no one's going to Rwanda.
No.
This won't be sorted out under this government, and he has to face the public in a general election.
Do you think it
disastrous?
Might be, I mean, I don't know if you saw today that rather obscure, which really pathetic kind of attack ad that they put out, in which they referred to Keir Starmer as better call Keir, a bit like Better Call Saul, making out that he's an enabler of terrorists.
It's gutter politics.
Yeah, it really is, and I mean, it's just pathetic, really, because he's a lawyer, and I haven't got much time for Keir Starmer, but there is also a principle that you do have to defend people from time to time. I'll have a go at him if he chooses to go and defend particular individuals, but if he's on what they call the cab rank and all of that, he's clearly not an enabler for terrorism. He clearly would try to put people away if they'd done something wrong. We can all argue about what he did in the past and all the rest of it, but maybe in some kind of twisted way, I don't know, Stephen, if you think of this, that Sunak wanted to see the Labour Party stop them so he could say, well, you stopped me doing the boats, and that's your fault.
Well, I think it's interesting to pick up on a point that William has made, because there's something that I like to return to, in that we seem to still believe that we should do theatre and new law.
Yeah.
And you govern a country by doing a bit of theatre, being a little bit controversial, which that ad clearly is, getting a bit of attention, and passing a new law. When actually, all that anybody really wants, and this applies to the Met as well. I mean, the Metropolitan Police don't need new laws.
Right.
They need to enforce the laws they have.
Yes. Well, we just saw what they were doing today in an alleyway in the West End of London. Carry on doing that, and you'll cut crime overnight.
Exactly. And there is a massive public outcry for enforcement rather than new laws.
Yeah.
And I mean, the small boats invasion could be declared a national emergency. It could be dealt with now. You don't need new law. So we get these, and I get caught up in it. Of course I do, because I'm a lawyer and I love the technical arguments, but, I am a bit of a nerd. I'll admit that. Your viewers don't have to be nerds like me. They just need to know that this isn't really necessary. Protecting our border is not that complicated. We have actually fought wars before. We can. The British state is actually capable of remarkable turnaround speed. If Russia were going to invade in 6 hours, all sorts of things would become possible.
Yes.
And what we're not seeing, or what we are seeing, is this reluctance in Parliament to admit that. They'd rather do the theatre, and what William called the gutter politics. Obviously, I don't have a view on that, but they'd rather do the theatre of it, rather than actual substance.
Well, I mean, the thing about that sort of advert is it feels like an open goal, because the only answer to that is you are the ones that are in power. You are the one, and for quite a long time, by the way. And I think most of us know that some of these problems stretched beyond before the Conservative government, have been sort of decades in the making. But I mean, Christ, you've been the ones that have been able to do something about this, particularly in relation to terrorism, particularly in relation to national security, over the last sort of 10, 15 years. So, I mean, you just can't put the blame like that. But I think this all comes back to the fact that, in particular, Rishi Sunak encapsulates this very well for me. The Conservative Party at the moment is split, and then each one of them is half worried about how they look on the international stage. Yeah. They're all, let's remember how many of them were Remainers. And that's not a sort of cheap point. It's saying that they still very much care how they're seen in Europe. They don't want to go near the ECHR. They don't want to do anything nasty around international law or do anything controversial. And that means that this Rwanda plan is a perfect opportunity to look like you're doing something. I think they probably hoped it wouldn't have backfired this bad. But it's a big sort of splash. Yes, new law will do something, knowing that it won't work. I actually think it's that cynical.
I think so.
They knew it wouldn't
Hold that thought, William, because we've got to just take a little break. But we're going to come back. We're going to talk about the royals. We're going to talk about all manner of other things as well. Also phobia for us all to worry about. Let's look at some other stories from tomorrow's papers, though. And we should, I suppose, guys, look at the royal story. I don't know where you all were. Or is it one of those where you remember where you were when they said that the Princess of Wales is in hospital and King Charles has got an enlarged prostate? Do you care? I mean, it's quite a significant moment. I don't know why they put them both out on the same day.
Well, maybe they are concurrent, aren't they? So that's part of it. But actually, he deserves credit for mentioning it because the issue is a
Charles does,
yeah, of course. And I mean, it could have been kept quiet, couldn't it? So.
Well, I mean, I think that would have been a mistake. I'm just curious as to who decided to release first the news about the Princess of Wales and then follow it literally less than 2 hours later with news about the King. There must have been a reason for doing it like that, mustn't
possibly. Yeah, possibly. But anyway, it's a big issue for all men, and men should get checked and bring it up to public attention.
But, of course, Kate's getting all the publicity on the front pages as opposed to him.
Yeah.
I'll be there for Kate, says William. Because there is, I mean, a constitutional question here. I had Robert Jobson in earlier, and there is a sort of series of successions which they apparently haven't yet worked out, and there could well be a situation, I know it's very remote, where either Andrew or Harry gets called upon to do some kind of functionary duty.
It's what I would say on this, because whatever you think about the royals is your personal political opinion.
Yeah.
But we have a constitution with a living monarchy. As a result of that, the health of those of the living monarch and of the successors is always going to be constitutionally important.
Yes.
It's always going to be on the front page of a newspaper. You know, the America's supremo, if you like, the top of its economy is a document that they can put in a cabinet and they can go to a museum and they can all bow. Well, every morning at school they pledge allegiance to their document. We don't have that. We have living flesh. We have a living constitution, which is real and human, and so we are inevitably engaged in this type of thing. But I mean, people don't have to care, but they will inevitably be told the health of the royal family.
Well, I do think it's. I mean, fair. You know, I take the point. Fair play to him for being open about it because it's something that affects many men. And actually, one of the things that's interesting is that he's getting treatment for it, and I think a lot of men out there suffer with just think that it's something that happens to them when they're old and don't realise that you can actually do something about it. But it is remarkable that the front pages of the paper are talking about steam treatment for the King in such an intimate area. I don't want to make light of it, but I do just think there's something about new generation of royals that is slightly too far for
There
me.
might be too much
that.
information to say. Well, I mean, I said this when we didn't know about Charles, but we did know about Kate, and I said I'm not interested in sort of speculating about what it might be that she's got a problem with. It's none of my business, really. I don't think it's any of our business to ask for intimate details of anybody's medical condition, and I think that's fair enough. You know, and there might have been a time years back when tabloid newspapers were a little bit more inquisitive than that. You know,
it's interesting with politicians actually because there's a famous book on Churchill's health written by his physician, and so there is a history of politicians' health, and you know you might have a prime minister on barbiturates making serious decisions.
Well, they used to say that about JFK, didn't they? That he had terrible back pain, and he was constantly taking painkillers, which may or may not have affected his mood.
So I think
the third.
Yes, exactly. So that, you know, it's slightly different with the royals, but certainly there's a big history of politicians hiding their illness when they're head of state. You know, it's very common.
Absolutely right. Let's talk about health from another perspective. There was a video that was released earlier on today, I think it was, up in Scotland. This is NHS Scotland. It's not actually in the papers at the moment, but we had a look at the video. I think we've got it here. Basically, up in Scotland, they've apparently decided nobody knows how to deal with cold weather. So they've actually issued this as a method of staying safe, so that when you walk down an icy street, you walk like a penguin, and that will mean that you will not fall over. It's been roundly criticised and ridiculed because it's just ludicrous, isn't it? You know, you could try gritting the streets. You know, I find it incredible that we now live in this nanny state where they're telling you how to do practically everything, how to walk down the street now without falling over.
Well,
I don't think it's going to work, is it? I'm sure I've slipped over walking like that. I mean, if you're walking on a street which is covered in ice, you're going to fall over. Right? Just grit the road.
Yeah.
Just, you know.
But you know, so many councils now
it happens all the time.
They don't even buy grit anymore because they say, oh, we don't really need it for 52 weeks of the year. We only need it for 1 week of the year, so we don't buy it anymore.
It's got the whiff of the policy expert somewhere in NHS Scotland, hasn't it? Did you know, Mike, since 2016, we've got 6,000 more government advisors on policy matters. So this is probably a policy person saying, you know, if you do this, you'll save X number of hip operations or broken legs, whatever, and they'll be worth it.
And they'll put it under the heading of preventative medicine, right? Even though it's just a video.
Well, I object to it because policy is the role of elected officials. So having paid officials to do policy seems to me constitutionally wrong.
It's a bit of a stretch to call it policy, isn't it?
Well, I really don't know what it was.
I'm only
going
guessing.
on. There is a prevailing political attitude, and it's whether you like it or dislike it, that the state is better off at running your life than you are.
Yeah.
And whether that pendulum has reached a point where it's going to swing back, or whether the pendulum is going to go further, we shall see. On a human interest level, my child has always believed that her grandfather runs like a penguin.
Right.
And from a very young age has loved penguins as a deep reaction. And as a 2-year-old at a zoo faced with a large bronze penguin, hugged it and said "Bampa," because there is this penguin connection. So I feel very familial with penguins. But
penguins are great.
Perhaps don't really need the tip.
I'm a great supporter of them. There used to be some great penguins at Edinburgh Zoo, actually, who walk like penguins and don't fall over. Funnily enough. So maybe there is something in it. Following on from that Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer nastiness, the Times have got a piece, not so much about that poster, but just saying that that Starmer is being attacked by Rishi Sunak because he actually did give advice to Hizb Tahrir, I think that's the right way to say it, Hizb Tahrir rather, who have now just been declared to be a terrorist organisation, which started the process, I think, in 2005. Tony Blair was supposed to declare them to be a terrorist organisation, and it's taken until now for James Cleverly to do it.
Yeah, so when he gave the advice, they weren't. I think this is, again, bad politics.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll play. It's very short-term attacking him this way. It'll probably get worse. I mean, I think we're going to get this all... Actually, the Labour Party's pretty bad as well. The terrible duo...
Oh, well, they did loads of Sunak, didn't they?
And Sunak,
he doesn't care about your children being attacked by paedophiles.
But also
rubbish.
Yeah, and also childishness. So the people that are in charge of the Twitter feeds, and you see this on the Tory side and the Labour side. Labour side decided to show a video of... a clip of Sunak trying to hammer something with the side of a hammer.
Yes.
Saying his dad wasn't a toolmaker. This is, honestly, just continue doing that. And no one will vote for these parties.
Well, this is why there's such disaffection, isn't there, in the
childish
big wide
behaviour.
world. They're just fed up with them. Train tickets costing double at machines, apparently, according to the Telegraph. Commuters are being charged up to twice as much to buy train tickets at machines compared to booking online. And this is, again, what the RMT say, isn't it? This is why we must have ticket offices to make sure that people who can't buy tickets online can actually buy them somewhere else. I've given up travelling by train. I just don't bother anymore. People that I know that do it find themselves incredibly frustrated.
Well, you don't want to sound like a Luddite, but it does. But there is so much that doesn't work unless you actually are able to talk to a human being.
Yeah,
I've just spent 2 hours on the phone to an internet company that shall not be named, and to the point where I was almost screaming.
Yes.
Just please.
Well, do you know what
make
happened
it
to me
end.
this week? I took my daughter to Heathrow just between Christmas and New Year, and there's a drop-off place where you drop them off, and then you're supposed to pay a fee. And of course, I completely forgot to pay it because you're not allowed to sit there and pay it, because if you do that, you get charged extra for sitting there too long. So I just now got a fine for it, 40 quid, for literally spending about a minute in a zone where there's no other way of paying. You can only pay online.
Yeah.
See, a lot of these things may actually be challengeable.
Yeah.
And what happens, because in my lifetime as a barrister, access to justice has rescinded.
Yes.
So little things don't get thought about in the way that they probably should. And the behaviour of train companies over the last 10, 15 years has been deeply questionable.
Yes.
The way that you turn up to a machine and it tells you, oh, you have to do that. That's not free and fair contract, which is what the law expects.
But they make it more difficult, don't they? Because it's like if your train is late and you're supposed to claim compensation, it's such a complicated process that you just give up and go, I'm not bothering.
Well, that was the EU solution. So we'd end up with a bad legal system, but you'd be able to get compensation for it.
Yeah.
You worked hard enough for it.
It's out of our... It's not our normal system. Our normal system would be much more simplified. And this point I often try to make, Mike, and I really must write about it, is that I think that there is a constitutional duty in this country for law to be understandable
Yes.
for everyone.
Absolutely.
Because ignorance of the law is no defence.
You
So
can't get
you'll be
access to
held
it.
guilty
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
don't know what the law is. At the same time, our law should be understandable for everyone.
Yes, and you shouldn't need a lawyer to understand it. Whereas in America, where I lived for 10 years, you couldn't do anything without a lawyer. And that's kind of where we're going now. Finally, for anybody who smokes, I don't know if any of you do, smokers are apparently getting charged even more money. Inflation is driving prices up. So just give up, is what I say.
Yeah, I'm an ex-smoker. It took me 3 times to give
Yeah.
up. I was on sort of 50 a day before.
Well,
so it's
listen.
a good idea.
It's all over, I'm afraid. I'm glad you gave up, but that's all from me. I've got to go. You've been watching Independent Republic and Mike Graham. It's been another fabulous show. Thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.